Hey there, good afternoon. It is May 23rd. It is Friday afternoon, 12:02 p.m. And I wanted to come on here and make a video. And yes, I have been working on my project. And while I've been doing that, I've been thinking about adding more stuff, that might not. I'm trying to figure out how I can add more stuff in, okay? Because the more I find out about these like violations that were taken against me, and I'm sure a lot of other targeted individuals, it just keeps getting, I feel as though it's important for me to be as thorough as I can be in the moral research, right? I mean, why do I keep saying moral research? Okay, it's probably because there is a little bit of research, that I do have to do. Like, I remember that certain things were, illegal or whatever, but I'm sitting here like looking up, penal codes so that I can share them with everyone else. So I'm being as specific as I possibly can. But I was thinking today when I first woke up this morning about the depressive state that I've been in as a result of I'm going to call it lifelong bloodline targeting. I know that the people who initiated the targeting were from the days of where my father was receiving this sort of treatment and this sort of bullying from his so-called friends. Okay, this is what I'm talking about. These people would come over. They would sometimes, pick me up, kiss me on the cheek, be friendly, very misleading type people. But they also had a side to them that was very crooked. These people were highly involved in things like, offshoots of the Operation Paperclip. They, followed the development of this sort of, these cloning programs or whatever. And so they posed as my father's friend, and some of these people, like I said, I looked forward to seeing when they would come home over, because I used to always get excited to see new people. And I honestly, felt a sense of warmth and remember them. I remember some of these people, and I'm not going to bring them up, okay? I do get the intuitive message that we are all at peace right now, okay? And I do think that you've learned your lesson. But what has happened is, it has poisoned a whole group of other people, such as Rex Laverne and, the whole issue with the apparition and everything. And, I was thinking the reason why I'm bringing up all this stuff right here, referencing people that my father used to work with, at NASA, and the people that used to come over to my father's house to visit us and stuff like that, is because, I realize how long this has been going on. And I realize the significance of my presence on the earth, meaning like I think these people, from a religious standpoint, have always been against me, like in a very pathological way, okay, because of the religious indoctrination. And this is unfortunate. Now, see, I understand that it seems as though, if this is the case, that this sort of hypocrisy is not a new phenomenon, meaning like, I had talked about, the Mormon faith and how they were involved because of the history of the Muma family, okay? And then we had people, certain celebrities that were also being influenced and stuff like that. Okay, so I need to step back from this whole issue, right? Going back to CB Berganza, right? And thinking about how it seems as though, when I think about some of these so-called friends and hunting buddies that my father had, and yes, I do remember some of them, okay? And I'm not going to mention this person's name, but I do remember you coming over when I was a kid and you going out hunting with my father, loading bullets in the garage with my father, and we thinking that you giving off the feeling of a comforting feeling, right? And I do believe that there's a certain part of you that was extremely sincere with that. But see, this is what I'm talking about. You came to my house on assignment to sit here and like observe my family. But yeah, at the same time, you were working as a double agent. Now, my thing is that I'm thinking about how we're talking about the Mormon Church, and I do believe it originated with, at least going back to C.B. Berganza. Okay, so, and I had just mentioned like the hypocrisy of Rex Laverne bringing all these other denominations in, which shows hypocrisy. Because I realized, I was thinking about where all this started, but when I go back into this, it seems as though the Mormon Church has been intertwining and been like this hypocritical operation for quite a long time. Because when I was thinking about, when we were younger, we did go to the Olivet Baptist Church, which they ended up demolishing. right? And then I do recall, I believe I was trafficked and followed, stalked, I guess, when I used to visit things like the Kingdom Hall. You know what I mean? And I do understand that the person that used to come over to our house and was my father's hunting buddy slash friend or whatever. I remember him telling me that he was a Catholic. And I remember going to his house one time and liking his house because it had a Catholic vibe to it. So my point is that this mind control program, I'm going to tell you, Nazis are like the master of mind control. The master of mind control. Okay, because I had talked about, the whole issue of cloning. Okay, the whole issue of cloning. I was ostracized or bullied or mistreated when I was a kid because I was a clone. Okay, and there was other clones, right? But that doesn't really sink into them. Also, what I thought was weird is like when you would bring up certain ideas, like you would ask or talk to you or bring up the conversation of things like reincarnation, and then all of a sudden everybody would sit here and jump on you and get angry with you and want to beat you down, and why are you talking about that? Who do you think you are? Okay, and they'll be in denial of it. You know what I mean? And because this has been a dirty little secret that the churches has been um, keeping for a very long time. Now, I will tell you, when it comes to things like God and pure, unadulterated spiritual energy, okay, we've got to talk about the importance of vibrating high. And vibrating high means being honest, okay? Now, this is something that is highly favored among the godly. Okay, now I'm not saying that I've never told a little white lie. We've always done that. Okay, and I'm saying as an adult, I do my best not to do that. Okay, so now, okay, we are talking about this issue. We're talking about churches that were collaborating, that were operating in collaboration with different groups that say they believe in different ideas and different denominations. Some of these religious groups don't believe that that we have a soul or that we're conscious as a soul. Okay, and there are so many different variations on what they believe, but they have been working together for a very long time. Okay, and you know why? Because we were talking about money, and I am not in any way trying to um, you know, well, it's a business. Okay, I understand churches are businesses. Okay, but what happened is that they have hurt a lot of people, and it's been a vicious cycle of you know creating these clones. Okay, lying about it, hiding the fact about it, using covert programs. And the hush hush, whatever. Let's not tell the kid that the kid you're adopting that they're not really a part of your family. We're going to you raise them as your own, and then at some point you're just going to go ahead and betray them or whatever. You know what I mean? But this harsh, insensitive, very Nazi resembling program has been orchestrated by churches for a very long time. And it's funny, everybody who talks about things like ritual, sacrifice, murder, and stuff like that, you know who they blame? They blame Freemasons when this stuff is actually being conducted by churches. Now this is very terrifying, right? It's very terrifying for a lot of people who have always put their faith in these institutions. Okay, but this is the reality. Okay, so I'm going to say the kids on the playground or the soul tribe or clones in general, we're the dirty little secret of the church. Okay, and they create us, and then bring us in, and then they cover it through things like dual affiliation. This has been going on for a long time now. We all know that I've talked about my birth certificate and it being on file with the Department of Vital Statistics. And I'm glad that I actually have a legal document. But the point is that how was this done? How was this done? This was done through dual affiliations. I was born in England, right? And then I ended up coming here and we had to cover the tracks, right? So this is what happens in these operations through adoptions, churches, and stuff like that. Okay, fine. Okay, let's learn our lesson and move on. Like I said, there could be some positive things about cloning, and that's great. But what I'm telling you is that for a very long time, people have been under a system of mind control. A very long time. Okay, that goes for, being around clones and recognizing that we're different, but somehow denying things like reincarnation, denying, or talking about Dolly the sheep being cloned. And they'll say things like, yeah, that's interesting that an animal's been cloned, but they haven't done that to humans yet. Yes, they have, and we've been right in front of your face. As a matter of fact, you've wasted a lot of time, bullying people like us. Okay, so it's like, and then the way that my parents were acting, following instructions to keep things private and stuff like this. This was built on a lie. Okay, this whole thing was built on a lie. Okay, and we already talked about, the whole alien origins and stuff like that, and uh, what I was thinking about is that they had taken a big interest in me and my father for a very long time. And, they create these clones, right? And because we are, modified, meaning like Diana Ross did not create me through her womb and, semen, like, a regular, what it was is I was, the DNA of me, or the original whatever, goes into her, and somehow all this stuff works. I don't know all the technical details, but she was the only actual mother that I had, meaning like before I was cloned, I was always cloned by use of incubator. Um, so, but there is no maternal bond there. There is no maternal bond there. Okay. So, but what I'm saying is that this was a means of unnecessary, uh, uh, an unnecessary type of, what do you call it? Yeah, bloodline targeting. Getting people from a long time ago, and that they actually thought were very strong and admirable, and trying to beat up on them. And that's what it is. It's a form of bloodline targeting, and it's really shameful. And I was thinking, about going back in the years of me and my father, and the experience that I would see, and how he declined, of his memory and his personality declined, and how he basically spiraled into a dark madness because of what these people have done. I remember, I'm getting very upset right now, but I remember one time, my father had just purchased a car. Now, mind you, my father was very frugal. Okay, this is something that they resent. They did not want my father having, anything. And same thing with me. Okay, so we moved into that house in 1974. Okay, and I believe in 1976, my father stopped driving his Chevy Biscayne, which was like a white car, and he needed a bigger car. Okay, so he purchased a Chevy Silverado. Okay, which we used to call it the retarded bus. Okay, but it was blue and white, and it was, enough to fit the size of his family. Okay, now we purchased that car in 1970, that vehicle in 1976. It served as the family vehicle. It also served, in the back, we had a little dog kennel so my dad could keep his hunting dog. Yeah, my dad was a hunting person, right? So my father drove that vehicle for years and 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 years. Okay, now finally in 1986, my sister's needed to get her driver's license, and so we thought, that my family thought, okay, well, we're going to need a new car, because Lisa's starting to drive, and it'd be helpful. She could help around the house, run errands and stuff like that. Okay, so I remember the time that my dad, when we first bought the vehicle, my dad was very panicky. He was he was panicking. He said, let's just go in the house. Let's just go in the house. I said, what, why? What's wrong? He goes, they're gonna get upset. Then, we're like, he was gonna have to suffer for upgrading. You know what I mean? For upgrading and getting a bigger car, or a different vehicle, right, to accommodate his teenage daughter. See, this sort of stuff has been going on for a very, very long time. Monitoring what a person buys, dehumanizing them in this sort of this situation. This is one of the reasons why they wanted me to lose my credit. This is one of the reasons why. The thing is that some of my father's so-called friends were actually Nazis, and they were competing with him. Okay. Now, mind you, my father, we were not anybody who had a lot of material things. Okay. We had a house that was, I would say, rather basic. Okay. In fact, I would say that the house that we lived in wasn't anything spectacular. Like, I've seen houses that were far more elaborate, more decorative, more beautiful, and in better neighborhoods. But it was a basic, family home, whatever. And, my father was very basic. But, I have noticed something. I really started thinking about, how these people ruined my father. Okay, because I will tell you, I used to dig around in my parents' closet a lot, right? And my mom and my dad, it seems like their life kind of ended somewhere in the mid 70s. Okay. And just like my parents, I realize that I collect old clothes too. Like, I try to stay with standards, okay? Like slacks, jeans and stuff like that. I can wear those year after year after year, okay? And just modify them a little bit and I can still get away with wearing them. They don't look too bad, okay? But there are sometimes I do like to look kind of funky and I deliberately try to look more from a historical time period, okay? But for the most part, I would stick with the classics. But I noticed that in my parents' closet as a child in the 1970s that they had a lot of their clothes from the 60s and it really reflected a vibrant, happy, bubbly, joyful type attitude. I used to just look at my father's sweaters, and I remember when I was in 8th grade, I was starting to get interested in fashion. So there were a lot of times I would dig into that closet, start grabbing some clothes, throw on like maybe a belt with one of my dad's old sweaters from the 1960s, or maybe even wear his dog tags. Okay, because I was really into experimenting with fashion. I took note that at that time my father had some pretty damn cool clothes. And then all of a sudden, my father started wearing clothes, in the 1970s that were just, how would I even describe them? Okay, we know how that Peter Griffin character looks, just like a pair of pants and just a basic shirt. And I realized that now I'm starting to realize that my father has been bullied by these people for a long time. And I will tell you, you have destroyed some people's lives. You've destroyed people's lives. You know what I mean? And so I now understand why my dad was getting upset. Like if I would, I remember the time he took me to Edwards Air Force Base. We used to go out to Edwards Air Force Base a lot, like on the weekends. And we would go to, like they call it, the base exchange, right? The base exchange, okay, I have to say at the time was rather boring. Okay. The reason why is because it really wasn't geared towards teenagers. Okay. But the only thing that they did have at the base exchange was cosmetics specifically for women of color. There was a company called, I cannot think of the name of it. Oh, I cannot think of the name of it. Fashion Fair. Oh, yes, Fashion Fair. Okay, so this was a company that specifically made makeup for darker colored people. And this was, unique, especially since, this was like the 1980s, right? So I remember my dad, I really wanted this color, this lipstick, right? And my dad started freaking out. And see, this was so unusual for my father because my parents have always said things like, you, Maria, you do what you want to do. Okay, you have the right to do what you want to do. So these people, the outsiders, started bullying my family, okay, over and see why isn't my father just didn't come out and say it? Why was he always just getting freaked out? They were never allowed to. I don't think they were ever allowed to let me know. They just wanted to. They just enjoyed having us run around in circles and beating up on each other and letting us see us, fighting and clawing each other and destroying our family apart. And this is the reason why I cannot respect this sort of stuff, this sort of covert nature. Okay, so when you think about it, I'm not the only victim of human trafficking in my family. I am a victim of human trafficking as well as my father has been a victim of human trafficking. Okay, for a very long time. And yes, do I believe that they were responsible for the decline of my father's what do you call it? Mental abilities? Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, because it's you cannot live in a constant state of anxiety, in a constant state of depression. And then also with their bullying tactics, you cannot live without any sense of hope. Okay, one of the things that, my father's funky clothes, or I wouldn't say they were funky, but they were kind of cool for the time, these were like 1960s type clothes as well as my mom's, okay? But one of the things is the expression of their personality, their happiness, their joy, okay? That these people go out around and they deliberately squash it out. They deliberately come out and destroy people's lives and monitor our stuff that we're supposed to do and bully us if they don't like it. I'm sorry, I have the right to wear that. You know what I mean? Now, I understand my father was working at NASA. Maybe they had a dress code, okay? But maybe my dad would have had a happier life if he could have been somewhere where he would have really been happy. You know what I mean? And really, how is that an offense? How is that an offense? How is that a wrong thing to do? It is not at all. You know what I mean? But what it is, it's one thing. It's like, I believe that it was racially motivated because these white people, did not want us to have anything. They don't want you to have anything that's going to give you any comfort. They want you to feel the full impact of misery. That's exactly what they want you to do. They want to dig inside of your brain, know every little thing about you, right? And then so that they know exactly how to make your life a living hell. Okay. And they enacted this sort of stuff out in public. This is one of the reasons why the new version of all of this, Rex Laverne, can't deny that this happened. They cannot deny that it happened. Now, I had a thought, and I've been having this thought, for a while. I remember um, thinking, about me and my father, being spirit travelers. Okay, what makes me unique to Rex Laverne, and that family. Anyway, what made me unique to them was the fact that I had this spirit traveler. But this is not the beginning of the spirit traveler thing. I got the intuitive message that in the 1960s, I was following my father around. You know what I mean? And this makes total sense because I have memories of listening in on my parents. I'm talking about Mary Gordon and James Gordon's conversation, but listening to their conversation in a location that would be kind of impossible for a kid. Like for example, my parents would be standing over here discussing this conversation, and the conversation that my parents, I remember him having, was my mom was saying that there was a draft in the room, and that drafts often indicate that there is a spirit in the room, right? And I was somewhere floating up above watching them talk. Now, I remember having this thought all the time, right? And I kept thinking, how is that possible that when I think about this memory, the position and the location that I am thinking or remembering this was not like sitting on the bed or sitting on the floor watching them. No, it's like watching them from above. So I must have been this little spirit, this spirit. We're spirit guides to each other. Okay, and this is the importance of understanding, how important it is to have strong family bonds. Okay, because if you have a strong family that truly loves each other, they will be with you forever. Now, yes, I did get this message about aliens and aliens. This is one of the reasons. My father worked for NASA. Okay, my father worked for NASA, and I do understand that it's a research facility. NASA is overall like a research facility, and I know that they've researched things, not just things relating to space, aerospace, but they've researched a lot of different things. I get the intuitive message that my credit will be cleared. Thank you, thank you. Now I need to start, working and getting my life back together, and I am looking forward to doing that. What else did I want to say? So yes, I do believe that I was around in the 1960s, and this is one of the reasons why I also think that I love the music so much and why it is so connected to me. Like, people think it's weird that I'm a black chick that loves like 1960s music. And I like things like the British invasion and stuff like this. I think it's because my father in the 1960s liked things like the British invasion and stuff like this. And me as a spirit traveler was sitting here like watching people like Paul McCartney, as well as my father enjoying music and stuff like this. And this is why this stuff's in my blood, you know what I mean? And it is what it is. And yes, my father, listened to all kinds of music, and it didn't matter to him. We looked at music as a form of poetry. It was a way of expressing our feelings. Certain lyrics. I mean, a white person could still express feelings, through song writing, just as much as anyone else, depending on the topic. Okay, a lot of people can relate to things like heartache, sadness, feelings of hopelessness, and it doesn't really matter to me where it comes from. If you are a brilliant writer, I'm going to appreciate it. And of course, melodies and stuff like that do come into play. But yeah, we listen to all kinds of music, and the 1960s music, I would say, is like really inside of me, like inside and out. And then of course anything that's British related, and I remember my dad used to, make this little funny like British type accent. It was a joke to him, but I think it was his way of understanding what was going on. Anyway, I do get the intuitive message that the issue has been resolved, and we are expecting to have peace distributed through the land, and that rebuilding is now underway, meaning like we're ready to move forward with positive things in the future. And this relates to regular people as well as clones, looking forward to a brighter future and hoping that we could continue on making things better for the future generations, whether they choose to stay here to regenerating on Earth or whatever, but Earth should be transformed. So anyway, I am going to wrap up this message. Oh, wait. I wanted to talk a little bit about the privacy. Okay, now I do understand, and I got the intuitive message that my information has not necessarily been kept confidential in the past. Okay, now I made this video, and I do believe that people are going to be compliant, but there's a lot of people who are not compliant in their companies. Okay, and I'm going to try to make this very simple. I'm going to cover this topic in the moral reset, not the moral research, but the moral reset. I am going to uncover it because just lightly. Okay. Now, I do understand that, there's ways that you can opt out of getting your information shared. And I do believe what they're talking about getting their shared information with another third party is like, for example, you might purchase like a teddy bear or something, and then maybe they might share this information with like a insurance company or something that connects with the same vein of line of business or whatever but like, for example, what I'm talking about is if I go into Walmart. Okay, I go into Walmart, and then the girl from Walmart knows that I was a customer there, and I go in there and I purchase like maybe something personal, like some maxi pads or something. Okay, which I am so over that right now. I'm like in my 50s, that doesn't happen anymore. But still, some women get embarrassed about that sort of purchase, right? So I'm at the checkout line at Walmart, and the girl checks me out, and then after I leave, she texts Mary, who is like my apartment manager. Now my apartment manager is sitting here getting online talking about Maria being on the rack. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like, I had mentioned a couple days ago about how illegal it is when, how it used to violate people's privacy when, a person who would come into that one company that my sister used to work for, Music Plus, right, and rent a a video. Remember back in the days when we used to rent VHSs and stuff, right? Okay, well, if you're over the age of 18, legally you can rent things like porn, right? You can rent porn, you could buy whatever you want to buy, okay? But see, it should be confidential, okay? Even though, some people might think, ew, that's gross or whatever. You might have your opinion about it, right? But that's the reason why it's supposed to be confidential. Now, let's just say, for example, this is the modern age, okay? It's no longer the early 1990s. We're talking about the newer days, okay? We have people who might be interested in that sort of entertainment, and they're going on certain websites, and they may be getting bounced around, having information spread about them online. Like, for example, the person who mans the site or whatever is sharing that information somehow, because this is like a big interconnected network. We have people in his community who are now spreading gossip about him. Okay, even based on that, you know what I mean? And then it can get out of control. It's one thing to sit here and watch a porn movie, okay, but it's another thing when people start adding to it, and now now it's not just him watching a porn movie. Now they're talking about him being a child molester, blah 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 blah. See, it can ruin your reputation. Okay, and he's not even interested in any pedophilia or anything like that. It ruins people's reputation. Okay, and then somebody should be held accountable for that. Now, some people would say, oh, well, they're going to argue and say, well, it's him. It's because he's the one who's watching it. Okay, well, you know what? The fact of the matter is, he's over the age of 18. This is usually the legal requirement in order to engage in those sort of activities, okay? Whether we feel like we want to do that or not, but that's his right to do it, okay? And, by disclosing his personal information, I'm sorry, but you're the one who's you're the one who's in violation. So, it's about hiring the right people, number one, because, some people, I remember when I realized I was a victim of gang stalking, I remember the stupid attitudes that these unprofessional people would say, well, of course we're going to talk about it. Of course we're going to share this information. Okay, well, if that is your attitude, then you do not belong in that position, and you do not understand that, why your position is supposed to be confidential. Your issue, these things are supposed to be confidential to prevent what we just went through. Okay, what you're doing is you're creating silent wars. You're creating people, and it's all coming from certain online retailers, people in store retail or whatever, blabbering their mouths and talking about stuff they really don't need to be talking about. Okay, and this is what's important. It's like tightening it up. And I'm gonna add this into the moral reset. And what I'm referring to is here in California. I'm just gonna read this really quick. Also known, it's called California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, also known as, okay, is a breaking law designed to significantly enhance the privacy rights and protections of California residents. It empowers individuals by providing them with the right to know what personal details is being collected, the ability to request its deletion, and the option to opt out of the sale of their information. Now, I understand that there's always these like little questions like, is it okay for us to use the information? I don't know exactly what they're doing with it. Okay, um, I'm assuming sharing it with other companies that are reputable, and once they receive your information, that they're not doing anything wrong with it. Okay, but I'm saying, and hopefully that's the case, okay? But I hope that when it comes to sharing information, this information is not being used just for the sake of bullying. See, now I can understand if you purchase a set of like maybe I don't wear eyelashes, but let's just say you purchase a pair of eyelashes online, right? And now this particular company is sharing its information with another cosmetic company, right? And so now you're getting, messages saying, hey, you're interested in cosmetics because we see that you purchased this. Would you be interested in this? Okay. For matters of conducting business. Okay. But when we have your personal information being used to conduct your, what do you call it, participation in your social group, just for your own entertainment, which is eventually causing, us to be bullied, to be reflected upon poorly or whatever, this is unprofessional. It's unprofessional. Okay, there's another. This has not actually become a law. This is here in California. It looks like that it is actually a law. The California Consumer Privacy Act is a groundbreaking law. Yeah, it's referred to as a law. Now I'm copying this information off of AI Assist. I'm using some of that to help me quickly research information, which is very helpful to me. Also, let me see what other thing that we have that's under federal law. I couldn't find anything specific under the federal law, but I think it's called, let me see, Federal Consumer Privacy Act. Okay, it represents a pivotal step toward securing robust data privacy protections for consumers across the United States. This groundbreaking legislation empowers individuals by granting them essential rights over their personal information, including the authority to access, delete, and control the sale of their data. Okay, and so I'm going to put those in and link those as reference material for the moral reset. Okay, and basically, there's a glossary that I'm making that has like the name of the term that I'm using, whether that be based on psychology or law. And then for the legal terms, I do have a little website where you can click and read about it yourself in more detail. But what you should know that, like, for example, if you see like a certain terminology on the left side, for example, like stealing or whatever, and then on the right side, you see a law, that should tell you right there that it's illegal. But if you want to get all the details, you can click on the link and then it'll bring you to, I'm using FindLaw. Okay. I like their information. It's clear, it's concise, and it also gives kind of examples of the law, the penal codes and stuff like that. So I think it's very helpful, and that's what I'm using. Okay. But yeah, that's my project. And I do think it's important to talk about, this is one way we're cleaning it up. Okay. Using people's purchasing information to gossip about them and create images or opinions about them to use for bullying purposes. This is just another example of how low people's standards are, and it needs to get fixed. Okay. We have a lot of problems and things to clean up, and this is one of them. Okay. I am angry that somebody was enacting this sort of racism slash religious superiority over not just me but my father. And like when I think about how nervous that these people used to make my father, how you made my father cry, how you made my father suffer. Okay, like I said, I'm a tough girl. Okay, but when I think about what you did to my dad, I get really upset. I get really, really upset. Because I remember seeing this man spin out of control. You know what I mean? And how you can sit here and watch somebody do that and just be okay with it. Whatever. But I'm just glad that we have peace right now. Okay. And I just want to move on and forget it. Okay. Is there anything else I want to say? Um, that's it. I think a lot of people are dealing with a lot of mental illness right now from all of this, and coming to understand that, yeah, this is a very serious issue. I talked about the cleaning up of social media, these sort of residual forms of harassment for a lot of people, and that's all it really is. It's a constant reminder of somebody pointing you out and telling you in their own special way that they want you dead. That's sick. It's very sick, but it's very real. Okay. And nobody appreciates that. So, yeah, I'm going to wrap up this video, and I will be back with another video sometime later. Take care. Bye bye.